If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Welcome to episode 54 of the FitNest Mama podcast. I'm your host, Kath Bequee. I'm a mum of 3 young girls, a physio for women, and I have an online community, FitNest Mama, which helps to provide pregnant and new mothers with the exercises, resources, and support they need to feel good from the inside out as they prepare for and recover from childbirth. FitNest Mama has workouts that are tired mum friendly, achy mum friendly, and toddler friendly that you can do in the convenience of your home at the end of a long day whilst your bubba sleeps or whilst your toddler is running around causing havoc. I have the pleasure of chatting to Gemma today as part of the Spilling the Milk series, and Gemma is a lovely FitNest Mama member who is a mum of 3 beautiful young kids all under 5. Polly's 4, Murphy's 2, and Chloe, who is just 7 weeks old. So Gemma shares her story into first becoming pregnant at the age of 26. She describes her different recoveries with each of her children, and Gemma chats about her experience with a 3rd-degree tear, her hip pain during pregnancy, and life with 3 children. Gemma describes relaxation strategies and positions that worked really well for her during her different stages of labour. So Gemma provides lots of great information, and I'm sure you will enjoy this episode. Before we dive in, I want to invite you, if you are pregnant or you've had your baby, to come and join the free FitNest Community Facebook group. Simply search Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond by FitNest Mama, and the link is also in the show notes, to come and join this rapidly growing, amazing community of other pregnant and new mums who are all there to support each other and cheer each other on during this crazy and beautiful thing we call motherhood. All right, let's dive into this episode with the lovely Gemma. Hi, Gemma. Thank you for joining me today on the FitNest Mama podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, we've just been having such tech issues. So 3rd time lucky, here we are. So we're talking with the Spilling the Milk series, and it's so delightful to have a chat to you today. And you're one of the lovely members inside FitNest Mama. So thank you, Gemma. You're a busy mum, I know.
No, thanks for having me. I was actually kind of reflecting before I jumped in on this, and I was like, because I've been in lockdown pretty much my whole postpartum period so far, I actually haven't spoken to a lot of people about my birth story. So I'm really excited.
That's great. Now you only have to talk about it once and you can just send them the link.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so could you please give a quick intro into yourself and your motherhood? Like, how many children do you have and that side of things?
Absolutely. Okay, so I have 3 kids now under 5, which is a little bit mad, but we're, getting through it all. So my first very energetic, confident little nearly 5-year-old daughter, Pollyanna, and then I have a son, Murphy, who is 2.5 and is right in the thick of that beautiful 2-year-old stage. And then I have my 8-week-old baby girl, Chloe. So motherhood so far is busy. And I live in a little town just out of Ballarat, Bunanyong, which is, in regional Victoria. And yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Oh, that's brilliant. So cast your mind back to your first baby when you became pregnant with Polly. Like, what were you doing at the time? When did you decide, okay, want to have a family? How was that process for you?
It was a really lovely process. So I think I was 26 at the time, so I was quite young. I always wanted to be a young mum, and I was really focused on my career, but at the same time was like, I think I want to have kids when I'm younger, and then in my mind I was like, I'll have more energy. So that was the motivation behind that. So yeah, I was 26 and I fell pregnant with Polly, which is really exciting. It was a really lovely kind of pregnancy journey, and there was no real complications with her throughout the whole pregnancy. So it was a really nice kind of introduction into conceiving and pregnancy, because it can be so daunting with your first, I think. So yeah, I was very lucky with her.
Oh, that's right. First can be daunting. That's so great you had a good experience. Now, I was thinking, are we going to chat about all your births? But let's just fast forward to your most previous birth, because I think it's always great to chat about what's, really on the forefront of the mind when you're in the moment. So with your pregnancy with Chloe, how did that compare to your first pregnancy when you already had two young children to look after?
Yeah, it was pretty intense. Pregnancy with Chloe was different in so many ways. So I fell pregnant when we were in the middle of big Victorian lockdown, COVID lockdown. So having that was a bit of a blessing in disguise in some way, because I was working remotely. So my kids were at daycare during the day, which was lovely, and I was, sitting working remotely. So that whole first trimester, when you're racing to the toilet, not feeling 100%, I was able to do that in the privacy of my own home. I wasn't having to do that in an office. So I was really kind of grateful for that. But at the same time, really struggled to get out and about, obviously with two young kids, really struggled to stay active. And that's kind of how I found FitNest Mama, because I wanted something that I could tap into, when I was time poor, do some exercise. I found it really helpful to do it on my lunch break at home in the living room. But I quickly found that it was actually a really lovely kind of community to be part of, and was a really great way for me to prepare for my third baby and from a birth perspective. So I guess I was really lucky with Polly. My first pregnancy, or my birth, she was quite a easy birth, I guess you could say. You shouldn't really say that because it's not easy, but like there were no major complications. It wasn't, a very long, I was in labor for 6 hours. And subsequently, I think I was really complacent when it came to Murphy, my second, because I had in my mind, I was like, this was a great birth first time round, second's going to be like that. I just wasn't prepared at all. You don't realize how much you forget in between babies. Maybe that's just your hormones kind of making you forget what birth is like as well. So I didn't actually really prepare for Murphy at all. And that was to my detriment. I was caught by surprise in a lot of different ways, and I still had a great birth with him. But I think going into my third with Chloe, there were just so many resources in FitNest Mama that I was like just lapping up and loving, and it would just change that whole mindset of the birth.
Oh, that's great to hear. So you just glossed over a few things I want to dive into there. You mentioned you had a third degree tear with your first, but you mentioned recovery is pretty good. Is that right?
Yeah, so recovery was pretty good. Obviously, it was very painful, but there was lots of, icing and just, I think the key thing for me that one of the midwives said to me, which really stuck with me, she was like, don't let the pain get on top of you. Stay ahead of the pain. Those first couple of weeks, don't feel like you shouldn't be taking pain medication. It's uncomfortable. So make sure that you get on top of that. So that was a really big one for me. And I think first time mum did a lot of resting. Second time mum did not do a very good job with the whole postpartum thing. I was up walking around. I think, Kath, you told a story about, going out and going for a lunch or a coffee with friends, going for a walk and then coming home and going, oh my gosh, I think I did the same thing. I was like, I need to get out and go for a walk with the, Bubba and the toddler. And yeah, got home that night and was like, whoa, what have I done?
What were you feeling?
Oh, just like so much heaviness and just like pain. So I, just remember wanting to lie down, and that was probably maybe like day 10 with Murphy. And I was like, I was just constantly icing after that, because I was just like, I just went too quickly with trying to get out there and walk and do all those kind of things. So, yeah.
And that's so common. And I can totally see why, because you're feeling good. Like maybe you'd had a good night's sleep the day before, and to go out for how long did you walk for? Like what was
was probably only a 20-minute walk up to the playground, grabbed a coffee, kind of was, had Murphy sleep in the pram, Polly was playing, we walked home. So it was probably like an hour out on my feet, walking around. And it wasn't brisk, it wasn't vigorous. But I think, I remember getting home going, that was too much. What have I done?
So hard. And I feel like postpartum, you either feel great or, you're feeling I'm pretty good, or you're feeling terrible. There's no warning. Once you get home from the walk, bang, it's like too late already. Yeah.
And that's when your baby will, want a cluster feed or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so how did things change up with once you'd had your third baby, Chloe?
Well, I guess it was mindset with Chloe, like the whole pregnancy. Again, maybe because I had more time at home during lockdown to reflect on things. But going into my birth with Chloe, I did another birth class. And so I did my first birth class with Polly was at the hospital. It was like watching, videos from the 80s, like a lady with a great perm giving birth and, sitting in a circle handing around forceps kind of thing. It was really disturbing. So the second one I did was with Tiny Heart's First Aid. So they did a virtual birth course, and it was really good because I learned so much more. And I think, again, mindset, reflecting back onto your previous births, you start to understand more about birth. And I felt a lot more empowered having more information. So because I'd been so complacent with my third time around, I was like, I really want some information. And I wanted to kind of have a little bit more of that kind of calm birthing experience. I wasn't, so to the point of I'm not going to use pain relief or, I just was really intrigued by calm birth. And I had also listened to a module that you had in the pregnancy section of the member hub around calm birth, and just started to understand so much more around the role that hormones play and how mentally you can prepare for birth. So I felt really empowered for my birth as opposed to, oh, here we go again.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant to hear. Okay. So you're pregnant with your third, you're wrangling 2 other children. Were there any issues with aches and pains during pregnancy? Like, how did your pregnancy transpire?
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Yeah, look, overall, it was pretty good because in previous pregnancies, I had had a lot of hip pain and had to do a lot of clinical Pilates. And again, being in lockdown with this one, I really struggled because I was like, I want to do that. I didn't have as much hip pain with my third, which was a blessing in disguise, but I did have a lot of discomfort purely because I was still being really active all the way into that third trimester with young kids. So lifting a toddler and doing all those kind of things. And I think it wasn't until, around 32, 33 weeks that I was like, come on, Murphy, you need to climb up onto the bed for me to change your nappy. Like, you need to climb out of the car seat. I was trying to teach him to do those things so that I wasn't just second nature lifting him all the time. So, yeah, there was still a lot of you get to the end of the day and just be so physically exhausted from doing all that lifting.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the days leading up to giving birth, how did you know you're in birth? Was there any warning in the lead up?
was really different. And everyone says that every pregnancy and birth is different. But with Chloe, I was in a lot of like, not like muscular pain, but everything felt tight for that last kind of 2 weeks. And so I had a lot of Braxton Hicks. So I was probably from 38 weeks, I was waking up, or 37 weeks, waking up in the middle of the night for like 2 or 3 hours having like Braxton Hicks contractions. And that starts to play on your mind because you go, is this the real thing? Am I going into labour? So it felt like I was kind of preparing for that for a long time. And I just felt like everything internally was just so squished, like all those organs. And at like 39 plus 2 weeks, I went into labour and was in labour for like 6 hours at home, labouring, kind of contractions definitely stopped starting, got to hospital, and they were like, oh, you're only like 2 centimetres. And I was like, okay. And then they said, so we think we'd like you to go home. You know, you're not that far from the hospital. Go home, rest. It's probably not going to happen for a heap. Just keep going. You're doing a really good job and we'll see what happens. They gave me some pain relief and I went home and they said, rest, try and sleep because you're only in the really early stages. And so I got home and then I woke up in the morning and I was like, nothing's happening. Like, I think I got home at 3 o'clock in the morning and I woke up at 6 and I was like, oh, it's all just fizzled out. So I had this false labour kind of thing, which just, I was so disappointed because at that stage I was like, get out. So that was like a bit frustrating. And then I had a couple of days of just being like, I was like Forrest Gump. I was just walking nonstop. I was just trying to get this baby out, trying to bring on labour in any way I could. And then I think after a couple of days of being quite like a mad woman just walking around everywhere, I was like, right, I'm seeing my obstetrician on my due date. I'm just going to say induce me, like I'm over this. And then I remember I had my appointment at 1 o'clock on my due date. And that morning, kids went off to kinder and daycare. And by about 9 o'clock, I was like, oh, that's odd. I think that's a contraction. And then it was on. And so my partner Sam was working from home. And I remember like sending him a text saying, keep going. You're on like in your meetings and stuff, but I think that we're going to have the baby today. And he just wrote back saying, okay. Like it feels like we've had so many false starts. Like, yeah. So he was like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, you just keep working and I'll just I just potted around really.
So you were both at home? Did you say he was working from home?
Yeah. So that was good because it was just really calm. Like I, had my playlist going and I think it was probably about 10 a.m. I was like, yeah, we're definitely like, we're on. We've got contractions happening in patterns here. So I started timing them, got the TENS machine on, which I used for my 2 previous pregnancies or births and loved the TENS machine. So I got that on and I guess I was just really trying to relax at home, but also was just really like pacing around and trying to get into comfortable positions for contractions and trying to stay really calm. So trying not to be like, at this stage was like, woo, but just trying to keep a lid on that and focus on just being relaxed and letting things progress.
So how did you have any strategies to staying calm and relaxed when you're by yourself at home?
Like I kind of went into a bit of an introvert stage because Sam kept kind of popping his head in and was like, you okay? And I'm like, leave me be. Like, I'll come and get you when I need you kind of thing. And so I was listening to, I'd made myself like a bit of a playlist and I was just like relaxing and listening to that. I had like a heat pack, which I kind of just kept putting onto my back, like in between contractions. But I remember in between contractions trying to relax as much as possible and trying to relax my pelvic floor. And so I think you said in quite a few of the pregnancy Pilates ones, really think about that drop and flop, kind of let it all kind of relax, which was so hard to do when you feel so tight and like a round balloon almost in pregnancy. So I was really just trying to relax so much, like all of my muscles in between contractions, which was really good.
Was that with deep breathing as well?
Absolutely. Well, I think some of those big kind of techniques kind of came in once I got into the hospital. So was probably around midday that I got to hospital. I think I was 5 centimeters dilated. So they're like, great job, keep going. And then within like 2 hours, I was like, I want to push like this, get this baby out. And then I was pushing for quite some time, and well, probably was about 40 minutes. And they said, we're just going to check again to see how far along you are. They're like, you're only 8 centimeters. We want you to stop pushing for a little bit to see if you can dilate a little bit further. And at that stage, I just turned to the midwife with like probably the rudest look on my face. I was like, I'm going to need some gas then. So I think that was probably the hardest thing, because in that mindset, I was like, well, I was just trying to listen to my body. It was telling me to push and you're telling me not to. So I got a bit frustrated, had some gas. And then that's when I really had that mental mind shift of being like, okay, you need to use some distraction techniques to get through these contractions to be able to, get a little bit further along. So on the bed, there was this kind of green mat, which I think is like a waterproof mat on the hospital bed, and it had these squiggly seams all through it. And I started counting those. I was kind of lunging up against the hospital bed, just counting these seams in the mat constantly through all the contractions. And then when it got to the stage where I was like, yep, we're pushing again, the baby's coming, they were like, hop up onto the bed and you can kneel up against the back of the bed. And I couldn't really verbalize, but I wanted Sam to take that mat, because I was like, my technique is working. I want to keep looking at this. So I was like, Sam, grab the mat and put it over there. He's like, what? And I was like, that bit of material needs to go over there. And he's like, what? I'm like, I have to keep counting. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm counting. The midwives are laughing because they obviously kind of could see what I was doing. So here he is standing next to me. This is like birth support partner 101 with this piece of material that was on the bed. And I'm like counting these things through my contractions as the baby's coming out. And he's just like, and again, like as a support person, he was like, I just want to stay up near your head. I don't want to cut the cord or be down there or anything. I was like, that's fine. Stay there. Like, hold the mat, do your thing. As she's coming out, he was like, oh no, I need to see. And then just left. And I was like, I don't know what to count. I was like drastically looking around the room for something to count, because that was what was working for me at the time. So it was pretty funny.
Did you know that you enjoyed counting? Like, did you know that was helpful for you before you were in the...
I'd done it in some of like when we had done the pregnancy Pilates ones where you make us sit up against kind of the wall, and I had done that like looking at like the pattern in the rug in my living room before. And so I'd not enjoyed it, but I found that was really useful. And I think some of the breathing ones were helpful, but at the stage of when I was like breathing through the gas, that kind of helped slow down your breathing anyway. For me, the counting thing was probably the most effective to distract me through a contraction. So that was really good.
Yeah, cool. And for those that are listening who are thinking, what are you talking about? We practice quite a lot of squats, wall squats in our classes, and we practice a different distraction technique throughout that wall squat, because we can't mimic a contraction, but we can sort of get our bodies in a position of discomfort, hence a wall squat, and practice some different distraction techniques. Because I'm a really big believer, like with my first baby, I did not practice anything because I thought, how easy is it to breathe? Or I don't need to practice counting. And I couldn't recall it when I was in the midst of the thick of it. And whereas for the third one, after I practiced it, it was just so much easier to bring upon what you've practiced. Is that what you found?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was in that heat of the moment when, the midwife said to me, stop pushing. And I kind of got really overwhelmed thinking, what are you telling me to do here? Like, I'm going against my instincts. And at that stage, I was like, yes, I want some more pain relief. I need some gas. But as well, I was like, what do I have in my toolkit to help me through this? Because it kind of just intensified so quickly. And then straight away, I was like, okay, counting. That's one that I practiced. And it was so simple, like literally counting the seams on a piece of material. But it was just that total distraction and being able to concentrate on that, not kind of let all that other kind of jumble that's in your head at that moment. Yeah. Yeah, so they put the back of the bed up for me, and so I was kind of pushing against that whilst I was on my knees, and that's how I had Chloe. So that was a really comfortable position for me, just to be able to kind of like push my elbows into the top of the bed and get through it that way. But because I had torn with my first two, that was probably a little bit of a fear that I had with the others. And so that when I got to hospital, that was probably one of the big things that I spoke to my midwife when they say, "What's your birth plan?" And I was like, "I'm really worried about tearing." And it was really interesting because at the hospital in Ballarat, they have this kind of new practice now where they have like warm compress, which they apply as baby's coming out. So they have a midwife kind of helping baby out, and another one really applying quite a bit of pressure to your perineum with warm pads almost, which was very different to my previous births, to have that kind of sensation as Bubs is coming out. But it was much better. I only had a 1st-degree tear with Chloe, which was very surprising because she was a big baby, like took quite a bit to, in that final stage to get her out. And I remember that final push, getting her out, the midwife saying, "Whoa, she's a whopper," which is not what you want to hear as you're birthing your child.
Was that the first thing you heard?
Yeah. And when I finally turned around and sat down and they handed her to me, I like swore and was like, "Wow, she's huge." So she was 4.3 kilos, which is like on the 98th percentile. My other two had been, around that 3.5 kilo mark. So she seemed like an 8-week-old baby. Yeah, that was quite strange, but to have all of a sudden this quite heavy baby, and she was long, and she was obviously really squished in my tummy in there because I wasn't measuring really big. So like, thank goodness someone hadn't said to me, "Hey, you're going to have a huge baby," because I think that would have played on my mind.
Yeah, interesting. And did you know you were having a girl?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, so once they popped you on your chest, what happened then?
So she kind of latched on pretty quickly and fed and was sucking for quite a while. And the obstetrician came in, had a look and was like, "Look, you've only got a 1st-degree tear, but because there is a bit of scar tissue from your previous babies there, we're going to give you a couple of stitches anyway just to help with your healing," which was good because my healing after birth was not that bad with number 3. So I was really happy that they did that. Because Chloe was such a big bubba, they did a heel prick test to check her blood sugar levels, and her blood sugar was really low. So that was something different for me because then the next 24 hours were much more intense than I guess I'd had with my previous bubbers. So with low blood sugar, they then want to try and obviously get that blood sugar back up. So they want to try and feed Bub as much as possible. And then she was having like sugar gels on the inside of her mouth. And then every 3 hours she was having blood tests to see what was happening with that blood sugar. And then after 2 tests, she was still not up to the levels that they wanted her to. So they transferred her to the special care nursery, which was, again, quite strange because I was like, well, she was born on a due date. Like, she's a healthy big baby. Like, you kind of think special care nursery prem babies. So that first kind of 48 hours was really intense because they wanted her to feed so much. And you don't have any milk that had come in at that stage. And thank goodness I'd done some expressing prior to birth, so some expressing of colostrum, probably from about 36 weeks. And I had a small reserve at home. And again, that was just something that I'd picked up in that birth class to say, look, it can sometimes help. You never know what's going to happen after your birth. So to have a bit of a reserve there for Bub just in case. So I was like, oh, okay, that's great. So thank goodness I had that, because you're trying to work out how to breastfeed again and then trying to pump as well at the same time. And then those 3-hourly feeds happen so quickly. Like if you're trying to feed for an hour and then you're pumping and then you might sleep for 40 minutes and then it's time to do it again. So that first 48 hours was just relentless in terms of blood tests, and yeah, it was strange.
And how did the breastfeeding compare to your oldest, Polly?
I think because I was waking, like with that first 48 hours, we were waking Chloe to feed every 3 hours. Plus she was on a drip as well to try and hydrate her. She just wasn't really interested in feeding. Like normally you have Bub, you have your birth, you kind of have like one kind of big first breastfeed and then they might sleep for a stretch of time. Whereas we were trying to wake her constantly to feed. So she was just not interested. So then I was having to, express. And then they were feeding her through the little syringes as well to try and get that in. And there was almost this kind of obsession about numbers, because I was like, when you're breastfeeding, you don't know how many mils a baby's having, but when you're expressing into a cup and then trying to feed her through a syringe, it's like, okay, so she's only had 3 mils. And then when you're comparing that to your blood test levels, it was really quite strange. And I thought, I'm really stressed here, because with my first, it was latch on, and it was all about really kind of trying to learn how to breastfeed and get that correct latch. Well, with Chloe, she just wasn't interested at all, because she was so sleepy that I just couldn't get her to latch on. And it eventuated, like, once she was out of the special care nursery, once her blood sugar levels were back up, once I could let her sleep for longer than 3 hours, she actually was more interested in trying to find food, so latching on, as opposed to just having it forced into her. So it was a totally different experience. Like, I was just quite shocked by the whole thing, because I had 2 babies, had been both full term. They had both kind of come out and latched on, and we had just kind of started this breastfeeding journey. This was completely different. And I was quite stressed in that first 48 hours of going, is she going to, have issues latching and breastfeeding? So, we weren't in lockdown. This is the week before lockdown, but they were still like quite strict with COVID rules. So there was only 1 visitor allowed to the hospital per day, which was okay. It was just my partner at that time. So no parents or the kids as well. So Polly and Murphy couldn't come in. So that was, they were just enjoying time with Nana and Pop.
Yeah. And how was that reunion? Well, how was that, the first time they saw their little sister? How was that?
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. I think, Polly just squealed a lot and was just so excited. And she still is so excited. Like, I think I have to say about 200 times a day, please don't touch her face. Like, stop touching her face. No, stop touching her. Like, I'll put her in the play gym and she's just like in there. And Murphy, my 2.5-year-old, is like, oh, yeah. And that's about it. He is excited to see her, but then he's like, oh, she doesn't do much.
Yeah. It's so funny, isn't it? That's just brought memories for me with my third, because my older 2 had been at kinder and childcare. And I remember one of them had a snotty nose, and I brought this new baby home, and it's actually physically impossible to keep them apart. And I remember my third baby, she was a week old and she had her first snotty nose, the poor darling, but she was okay.
Oh, the exact same thing. Yeah, Murphy had like the snotty nose, and I don't know, maybe it's because they've had 12 months of COVID, and so they're like pretty good with washing their hands and stuff like that. So I was like, before we have a hold, we'll, use some hand sanitizer and stuff like that, thinking that would help. But no, Chloe had, the snuffly nose within a couple of days, and I was just like, okay, this is just third bubbers. Whereas I think with Polly, she was, first she's wrapped in cotton wool for a long time.
Yeah. Be expected, totally. So you had the first degree tear, and how has your recovery been these first few weeks? You mentioned that first walk, the big walk, but apart from that big walk.
Yeah, so I was much better with my postpartum recovery with Chloe, I think, because I'd had this mindset of you just need to rest. And I think, again, in one of your modules, there's like a little PowerPoint that you go through, and it tells you how many minutes you should walk, week 1, week 2, week 3. I screenshotted that and I sent it to my partner, and I was like, don't let me do more than this. And he's like, cool, great. So I think third time round, I did a lot more resting, a lot more lying down, and this double-edged sword of being in lockdown was a blessing in disguise. So we were lucky that, we went into lockdown when Chloe was, I think, maybe 10 days old. So we did get, grandparents and aunties able to come and meet her when she was the first couple of days old. But then we've kind of been in lockdown since. And so that it's been hard not to have, all these beautiful friends come over and see your baby. We haven't had any of those, crazy days of having lots of visitors or anything like that. So it's been this really permission to have this restful period. So
it's got its pros and cons, doesn't it, lockdown?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing, I guess, your story. And to finish off with, what are your words of wisdom for pregnant mums that might be listening today, from a seasoned mum of 3 who's recently given birth?
I think when it comes to pregnancy, I think for me, that whole preparation for my third, like I said, it was really empowering to have information behind me. And that's really hard with your first because you don't know what to prepare for. You don't have anything to refer back to. I even remember getting in my first birth, the midwife saying, "Do you want more pain relief?" And me saying, "How far up Everest are we? I don't know how much more painful this is going to get." It's really hard because you don't know what you don't know. My advice is, for second, third time mums, give yourself that time to be able to prepare for your birth, because I didn't do that with my second, and I had a much more positive birth experience with my third, just because I went into it with that mindset of having more information, arming myself with, just some more techniques, because you don't remember them. So that's probably my pearls of wisdom, I guess. And that's so hard because there is so much information out there. You don't want to overdo it, but you just take what you think is going to work for you.
Oh, well, you're a star mama, and I'm super proud of every time I see you join a class, or we've got a spring challenge at the moment and you're posting online everything you achieve. You've got your kids in tow. It's just beautiful. Beautiful to see. So well done. I think being able to invest in your body, I think it's just so important, because pregnancy and childbirth go for 9 months, and your afterbirth recovery, it's for life. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Super proud of you. And thank you for chatting today, Gemma.
Oh, thank you. It's been really fun.
Oh, good. We'll catch you soon.
Alrighty.
Before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode, including how to join our free FitNest community Facebook group at fitnessmama.com/podcast. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the FitNest Mama podcast. Thanks for listening to the FitNest Mama podcast, brought to you by the FitNest Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at FitNest Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer: materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'll see you soon.